Hello, insiders and guests today. We have all kinds. Welcome, welcome. Come in, say hello. For those of you in the know, you can please introduce yourself, say hi to Tom and I. Tell us where you are coming from. I'm going to start our pre-show speech. So, welcome to our latest installment of Wild City. This is the history of sewer alligators in New York City. Very excited about this one. We're happy to have you with us. We are led, as always, by Wild City author, Untapped contributor, and good Untapped friend, Tom Hynes, who's on location out in Eastern Long Island today, chasing alligators off the beach. For those of you who are not Untapped New York insiders, I welcome you guys. Our insiders are enjoying all of these virtual talks. We do one or two a week for a virtual membership that's as low as $10 a month. I put the link in case you want to try. You can use the code Join Us for 1 month free. Also, if you have not yet, please purchase a copy of Wild City.
Duh.
I think a lot of you already probably have it, but if not, I did send the link over to you from Books Are Magic, which is a local bookstore here in Brooklyn. And as always, hopefully you're giving us a shout, and I will read a couple of names out before I turn it over to Tom. So Elliot, hello from Las Vegas. Jeffrey from the Upper West Side. Klaus, I've been seeing a lot of you virtually and in person. Good to see you from the Flatiron District. Christopher from Staten Island. Pete from sunny San Francisco. Pete, we seem to be getting a lot of haze from the West Coast over here. Gareth, good evening. Midnight from Wales. Gareth, thank you for staying up so late for watching this. Leslie from Ontario, Canada. Welcome. Robin from the waterlogged Berkshires with a smoky skyline. Yes, we have a smoky skyline here in Manhattan and Brooklyn as well. Lisa from Arizona. Thank you for coming. Nancy, Jerry. Awesome. Good to see all of you. Continue to say hello. And Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is all you. I will be back for Q&A in a little bit. Please put your questions for Tom in the questions tab, and we will do Q&A when he is finished. Go for it.
Justin, thank you so much for having me. Insiders and outsiders, thank you so much for having me. This is a very special, it's always so much fun to do these. This one is a special place in my heart. The alligators in the sewer was not only a thing I heard from my Brooklyn-born parents growing up. I thought I was the only person being told it. It was also the first article I ever wrote for Untapped Cities. It is the first, Untapped, when it was Untapped New York, Untapped Cities, the first New York City wildlife venture I ever had. It was the first words I wrote in the process of writing this book was an article about alligators in the sewer for Untapped way back in 2015. So it is, or maybe even earlier, 2014. Anyway, it is so great to be with you all here today talking about one of the most fun topics in the book, which is basically the truth behind the legend of alligators in the sewer. So let me just move along here. So this is a illustration from the book, and I like to start each of these presentations with an illustration of the book. There'll be some more illustrations from the book later on. But just as a way to give a shout out to the book's illustrator, Kath Nash, recently of Brooklyn, now of Los Angeles. I think you can find her work at Kath Nash, KATHNASH.com. She's a wonderful illustrator and artist, animator. You'd be lucky to work with her if you ever need anything done in that regard. And I was very lucky to work with her as well. So this is our alligator in the sewer. I was really always very intrigued by this because, as I mentioned earlier, I have two parents from Park Slope, Brooklyn. My grandparents, aunts and uncles are all from Brooklyn. And I grew up in the suburbs, and I would hear these sort of fantastical stories about how New York City was such a crazy and wonderful and wild place that it even had alligators roaming around in the sewer. And the way my parents told me is that they would get, bought as little trinkets and then flush down the toilet, and they would thrive down there off of our trash and our rats and other things. And that's where men fear to tread was under the sewers, not just for the septic reasons, but also there were these man-eating predators down there as well. What surprised me when I went into looking into this is how other people have really heard this same tall tale or story. So this is a Google image search I did back in 2015, where I just typed in the words NYC sewers, and as you can see, alligators comes up like 2 or 3 times in the first results. So it wasn't just me who was thinking about this. It wasn't just my parents who were telling me these sort of fantastical bedtime stories. So what I did as an aspiring journalist, I was very aspiring. I was a full-time marketing copywriter, but I figured, all right, let's reach out to the sewer system and see what they have to say. And I got a response, which was pretty funny, because it was like, you can't use my name in the article. This is off the record, and absolutely not have there ever been any alligators in the sewer. And it was too bad, because the source had like a real fun alliterative name that I would have loved to have seen in print, but you have to, of course, respect your source's wishes. However, this is a t-shirt that was from the New York City Department of, I think, Environmental Protection, but you could get these at the sanitation department store for a while as well. So they clearly were aware of the rumor, the legend. They're having a little fun with it. I'm sure they, don't want to really put fear into people and go on the record saying they're down there, but they do have a little fun with it as well. And it turns out that this was the story that my parents told me was really pretty close to how it went down. You could buy a baby alligator, whether on vacation in Florida or the Carolinas or somewhere in the Bahamas, or excuse me, in the Caribbean. But you could also just mail away for one. Here we see an ad from, I think, the 30s or 40s, $1.50, and it would come in a little box, and you would have an alligator. And sure enough, that happened quite a bit. It was advertised in all over New York City papers and magazine, Boys Life, things like that. And people did it. And they're not good pets. I think they kind of reveal themselves to not be very good pets pretty quickly. I mean, these are basically like, man-eating dinosaurs that have survived for millions of years in this super efficient killing way. And they're not meant for, a bathtub in Bensonhurst or Crown Heights or the South Bronx. So before too long, any like reasonable parent was like, we got to get rid of this. Now, either they, put the thing down, physically, or they just flushed it down the toilet. Now that's where the rumor kind of went, is that this is where it started. People really did have alligators in their bathtubs and as pets. This was a real phenomena, and a lot of them very well did go down into the sewers. But what I was also really startled to learn was that there are a lot of documented cases of alligators in the sewer in New York City, going back almost 100 years. Just going in to search some of these newspaper archives, this was a thing that happened quite a bit. The most notable one, or the first one, but not really the most notable one, the first one that I could find was in 1932 in the Bronx River. Now, the Bronx River, of course, is the only freshwater river in New York City. Alligators prefer freshwater. It runs right down the middle of the Bronx from its start in Westchester County down into Long Island Sound. And, it's just a beautiful, beautiful area now, and probably was not as nice in the 1930s. But there were reports of I think 2 or 3 alligators, and these kids went to the park police and reported it, and then the park police went back and couldn't find them. So the sources were a little murky on it, even though it did get some press. But it was 3 years. And this is a map of the Bronx River, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. And just as an aside, people who know me know that I am a big fan of the Bronx River. I'm a big fan of the cleanup and restoration that's gone out there. And, in writing Wild City, I took a canoe trip down the Bronx River, starting, north here of the Botanic Garden down through the zoo. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences I had, not just in writing the book, but just in New York City in general. I didn't see any beavers that day, but I did see a very well-recovered river, and some really great proof of what environmental remediation can do in New York City. So if you have a chance, I highly recommend looking into the Bronx River Alliance and any of their flotilla paddles up and down the river. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to spend a weekend day. So anyway, let's moving ahead 3 years to 1935. This is when like literally the big gator was found. Now, when I wrote the book, I actually hadn't seen this photograph, but I had read the articles and talked to some historians who sort of had read some other sources about it. And this was an 8-foot alligator lassoed in the Harlem sewer. I think it was East Harlem. 3 Italian boys were shoveling snow into a manhole in February 9th, 1935. And they saw this thing thrashing around underneath it. That's a humongous alligator. So, you know, if we're to believe this legend, you know, 7 feet earlier in this alligator's life, it presumably was flushed down a toilet. And, you know, I don't know how it would have gotten down there otherwise, but this is a pretty significant alligator. I know they can grow much bigger than that, but you know, for Manhattan, that's a lot of alligator. So they, it didn't look like it was doing particularly well down there, which also sort of lends itself to the true nature of what's happening down there with the alligators. Is not really like an ideal environment and a habitat for them, but we'll get into that later. They basically made like a lasso, a slip knot of sorts, and the 3 boys pulled the alligator up to the street, causing obviously like a huge commotion because like, oh my God, it's an alligator. And I think just because they were teenage boys and also, you know, what is your plan if you find an alligator? You know, we can say this is probably the unethical thing to do, but I'm not, you know, going to judge someone who finds an alligator sort of by surprise. They did beat it to death with shovels. Just maybe they thought it was self-defense. Maybe, I don't know. But and I was told that there were no. I mean, I was under the impression there were no photographs of it. But then in preparing for this talk, I was able to discover this amazing photograph. I believe it was incinerated shortly thereafter, but I might be thinking of something later in the presentation. 3 years after this, 2 years after this, I believe, this was, yes, 1937, another 4-foot alligator captured in the East River. Around this time, I think the same year, there was an alligator that was found walking around one of the subway platforms, I believe on the AC line. It was like Hoyt Schermerhorn, I believe. I can confirm what that was, but there was an alligator found walking around on the subway platform. So they were sort of around. This was this real phenomena, and you know, with a pretty, you know, startling frequency, you know, of every other year for a while there. They were found underneath the sewers or underneath the streets, and it stands to reason in this huge city with this huge, massive, I believe it's 2,200 miles of sewer or something like that. It's in the book. I mean, there's some huge mileage of sewage system in New York City. I mean, there were probably more than the ones that were discovered, you know? And so it is really this thing that was born in very true stories, very true, well-documented stories of alligators being found all over New York City. And then, of course, from there, it kind of took on this legendary status, and it kind of, you know, loses it blurs its line with like what was real and what was not. But in 1959, this nonfiction book came out, and it's by Robert Daly, and it's called The World Beneath the City. And as the title sort of suggests, it's about the inner workings of New York City and the sewer systems. And Robert Daly interviewed sort of a famous character in mid-century New York City. His name was Teddy May, and I believe this is a photograph of Teddy May. Teddy May was the superintendent of the sewers, and you know, was like a real character. Claimed to know every, you know, mile of the sewage system, every inch of it. There's one story that I heard that I believe it was Ulysses S. Grant's daughter had lost a ring in a toilet, and he said, you know, what block was it on? I'll find it. And then he did find it. But he was so confident that if he could tell you where the toilet was, he would know, you know, where a diamond ring might end up in his sewer system. So in the book, Robert Daly, Teddy May has told to Robert Daly, says that he was told by his men that there were tons of alligators in the sewer. And he didn't believe it. He accused these workers of drinking, you know, whiskey-induced fantasies, I think is what he called it, and went down to see it themselves. And there's this incredible quote from the book where he's rappelling down into the sewer system, flashes a light and sees all of these eyes sort of glowing back at him, and sees what you would call I believe the collective noun is congregation, a congregation of alligators paddling around serenely right underneath the biggest city in the world at the time. So now, again, this is sort of a, you know, a kind of a cat, a card. This guy's sort of like a showboat, Teddy May, who is telling someone else about this. So it's not really like, you know, something you see with your eyes. I mean, you can take this with a grain of salt if you want, but presumably Teddy May spent more time in the sewers than I had, and this is what he reported. And then the rumor is that in the 1950s, 1960s, that the alligators were all sort of wiped out then, and that's why we don't see them as much. But it was sort of that remnant of the surge of the 1930s, 1920s, and the pet alligator craze, and sort of the downstream manifestation of all those ones that were discovered, the bigger ones that were discovered in the late 30s. This is another picture of Teddy May, who just seemed like a real fun guy. And 3 years after that, moving from nonfiction books to fiction books, the debut novel from great American novelist Thomas Pynchon, V period, debuted. And the main characters, I think they're called the Whole Sick Crew, Benny Profane and the Whole Sick Crew. They're just some like loafs in New York that, you know, are kind of aimless, and they have these sort of city jobs that, you know, they're not really that motivated people. And a few of their jobs, few of the people in the Whole Sick Crew, their jobs are in the alligator unit. And it's just a funny detail of the book. Like, they're not really like, you know, it just kind of discusses it as though it were a real thing, as though it were a real department of New York City. And that's what Benny Profane's job is in V period. So it's just an example of the cultural imprint that the sewer alligators was beginning to have. You know, we had these real life things, and then you know, it sort of bleeds into our popular culture, and then this is where it really transitions from a you know, a real phenomena into this sort of tall tale. This is something I just actually, someone alerted this to me about 2 or 3 days ago. This is my favorite comic as a child. This is, of course, The Far Side, and they've been republishing their comics, a few comics a day, and this was from just last week. Truthfully, it was from like 1984. But we see again, curse this New York City sewer system. It's backing up again. Oh, and I just want to say one thing. Let me just go back to Thomas Pynchon. Thomas Pynchon and sewer alligators, I like to think, have something in common. So what we know about Thomas Pynchon is very little. He has written all these wonderful books: Gravity's Rainbow, The Crying of Lot 49, V, Inherent Vice, and others. He lives somewhere in the Upper West Side, and there are no known photographs of him. He is the most reclusive yet public-facing person in the world. When Paul Thomas Anderson adapted his book Inherent Vice into the movie with Joaquin Phoenix and others, apparently Thomas Pynchon is hiding in plain sight as one of the extras in the movie. So I like to actually, in the book, I refer to him, Thomas Pynchon, as himself a type of sewer alligator. He's this legend that maybe it doesn't exist, and right here in New York City. And then when the book came out, I figured I wouldn't have this opportunity to ever reach out to him again, and I don't know that this worked, but I had the publisher HarperCollins send a copy to Thomas Pynchon with a short note alerting him to the fact that he's been referred to as a sewer alligator in my book, and that I hope he doesn't mind. Anyway, moving on. So we see the Far Side comic, excuse me, and here it is in The Simpsons. Of course, we can't forget any opportunity to mention Abraham Simpson here and his misadventures. And then this is a sculpture on the 14th Street subway station on the AC line. I believe the 8th Avenue line. This is by Tom Otterness, and this is called Life Underground. This is one part. It's the whole platform is this whole series, and actually up the stairs a little bit. These little anonymous men with money bag heads, and one of them is being devoured by a sewer alligator. So even in this fantastical, you know, artistic sculptural world, the alligator in the sewer is something that resonates even there. You don't have to explain to somebody coming off the subway what this is. It's sort of like this known, you know, common thing that we all share. Now, this is a picture of Lauren Coleman, the director of the Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine. Now, he will tell you that there are still very much alligators roaming around in the sewer. That is a thriving community, congregation, population, what have you. And he, you know, the idea behind cryptozoology, which is, here's a picture of the Cryptozoology Museum's logo and website, again in Portland, Maine. The idea behind cryptozoology, and one of the reasons that the sewer alligator has sort of been embraced by cryptozoologists like Lauren Coleman, is the study of animals whose existence has not yet been proved. So it's not that they can't be proved, it's that they have not yet been proved. And as a former marketing copywriter, I do appreciate this distinction. I think that's a fun use of language. But it is, you know, Loch Ness Monster is in their purview. Skunk ape, I think the New Jersey Devil, you know, like all of the fun monsters out there in the world that we, you know, Sasquatch that we see back here, Bigfoot, looks like a relative of Lauren's, but I think that's probably unintentional. They, you know, they believe in sort of the unbelievable, and it's not something that I would, you know, necessarily dismiss. I would point out there's not a lot of like examples or facts or like scientific research behind this. You know, like there's a lot of adamance, or they're very adamant rather, and there's a lot of like insistence and confidence that these mythical creatures still, these cryptids as they were, still exist, but not a lot of evidence. Yeah, so I mean, Lauren Coleman, he's a funny guy. He's written a ton of books. He's been on a bunch of TV shows. So, you know, he's, you know, in our small world of alligators and the sewer experts, you know, it's me, it's Lauren Coleman and a few other people. There's not a lot of us, but he's really the big dog. And I'll give him credit on that. So here we have, you know, slide on the Loch Ness Monster, obviously, which, you know, hey, it's interesting because it's like it hasn't yet been proven, and maybe it will. So they do leave themselves a little wiggle room there in the verbiage, which again, as a former marketing copywriter, I do appreciate. But the one thing I will say about cryptozoology, I believe this is a okapi, if I'm saying that right, OKAPI, I believe. This was an animal that was in the field of cryptozoology. It was thought to not exist until it did exist. So, you know, this is the one thing that kind of makes me wrinkle my nose and furrow my brow when I want to dismiss cryptozoology as like a silly thing. This, and I believe the Komodo dragon is the other one. These are animals that people said didn't exist. The cryptozoologists said, no, they do exist. And then lo and behold, they do exist. So, you know, again, maybe there are still thriving alligators in the sewer. I think the size of the sewer cistern kind of makes that hard to know, but you know, it hasn't not been proven. So it's an interesting thing. So in talking about the monster, you know, the alligators in the sewer, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about a few other monsters and just sort of, you know, dangerous, critters running around New York City. And when I put together this talk, I thought I would include some of the other examples from the book. So this is another illustration by Kath Nash. This is the East River Monster. The East River Monster was discovered in New York City, I believe, in 2012 in the summer. This is one thing I love so much about this illustration is the coffee cup in the bottom left-hand corner. I can't remember if I asked Kath to put that in the book somewhere, but that's one of those funny New York City things that I just love. And I believe Untapped has a article. I see Justin typing. I think there's like a whole article about like what the whole story behind that. And it's one of the many great resources on Untapped New York. So check that out. I think Justin's going to put that in the link, that link in the chat. At any rate, this beach that we see here, this is not like Far Rockaway. This is the spit of land between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge in Manhattan. This is like 100 yards from South Street's Seaport and Wall Street Pier. This is like right downtown. This is that one little area of beachy lower Manhattan that still exists. This little guy washed ashore, and not really clear what it was. This illustration, of course, is this gives you a better vindication of where it was found. You can see that the illustration is not too far off. If anything, it's just a little less detailed and grotesque. But this is a photograph. That's of course, the Manhattan side tower of the Brooklyn Bridge. That's Brooklyn Heights and Brooklyn Bridge Park in the background. And this is God knows what. This is the East River monster that was not really clear what it was. What happened is that it was collected by the Parks Department, incinerated, and then an explanation was given. And I think the explanation was that it was a pig from someone's barbecue that they then, I guess, threw in the water. And as that sounds stupid, I agree with you. That's what the official story was, and it doesn't look like any of those things. It does look like, it had some bloat, and that makes it hard to tell what it was. But this was sort of an interesting mystery, and at such a populous touristy area, it was kind of remarkable. And of course, it had come just a few years after the Montauk monster of 2008, which of course captured my heart and imagination and fascination for that whole summer. And what was interesting about, I think the fun conspiracy theory about where the East River monster and the Montauk monster came from, especially the Montauk monster, is the Plum Island Disease Center, Plum Island Animal Disease Center, which is at the far end of Long Island, not far from where the Montauk monster was found. But of course, it could have made its way down to the East River as well. This is sort of like a shadowy animal research center. I mean, it's what it sounds like. Suspicious people might tell you that Lyme disease was, hatched there. That's not what I think happened, but there's mad cow disease, I think, started in a lab here. There's not a lot of information coming out of here, but there's a whole lot of security and secrecy. So it is sort of appealing to think that some mutated disease animal, got loose from Plum Island Animal Disease Center and maybe washed ashore. And that's why the East River monster and the Montauk monster look so foreign to us, and why there was such a fascination with them. And of course, that is sort of the appeal of monsters, that it's all of the world's worries sort of made manifest. And it's kind of a nice little vessel for us to put all of our anxiety in. I'm a big fan of monsters as sort of an abstract concept. So they were fun. The Montauk monster and the East River monster were really fun stories to follow. But they were not the first New York City monster story. To really get there, you have to go back to the 1780s, 1770s during the Revolutionary War. So this is another illustration from the book, which you might be able to tell. This body of water is the Collect Pond, the former Collect Pond, which now is the 5 Points neighborhood in Lower Manhattan, which is also, City Hall, if you will. It is the African burial ground would be on the northern border of what was the Collect Pond. So parts of Tribeca and parts of downtown. Basically, if you go just north of the off ramp of the Brooklyn Bridge up, I guess, Lafayette or Center Street there, that was I think a 50 acre freshwater pond in Lower Manhattan up until the early 1800s. And this was the freshwater source. And if we think about the history of New York City, of course, it all started with the Lenape people. Let's not lose sight of that. The European conquest and later creation of New Amsterdam and New York City, beyond the previous existence of Manhattan as it had existed for centuries, began in Lower Manhattan, at the tip of Lower Manhattan, and then moved its way north for decades and generations and centuries. The famous line about City Hall not needing a good facade on its north edge because nobody really would ever be up there was indicative of how much the city really was concentrated downtown. And the Collect Pond was the lifeline of that up until about the 1800s. And the story here is of the Collect Pond monster. So during the Revolutionary War, New York City obviously was a hugely important place strategically, but it was also a place that the American forces didn't do particularly well. We had some, victories in other places, but New York City, I think I wouldn't be incorrect in saying we got like our ass handed to us. Like we really like the Battle of Brooklyn was not a good day for New York City for Americans, and it was such a strategic place. This is where the British made their headquarters. This was hold at all costs a kind of port, and so the British were running New York City at this time, and they built a garrison, a prison on the shores of the Collect Pond. And our American prisoners died of exposure to the wind and of starvation. I mean, it was really like I think it was called the Bride's Head or Bride's Well or something like that, and it was pretty terrible place to be. And of course, this was in line with how the British acted, here during the war. And we know that with the maritime, the ship prisons where prisoners were kept in the East River in Wallabout Bay, which is now Navy Yard, and their bones were then collected as to be sort of lionized at the top of the pillar in the monument in Fort Greene Park. That's the Ship Prison Martyrs Monument. That is in line with what this prison on the shore of the Collect Pond was sort of affecting as well. So the story is that there. Here's just another map from 1767. You can see in sort of the top left here. I don't know if you can follow my cursor here. You can see the Collect Pond there. It says freshwater. So it really was like this crucial part of New York. Another map here. You can see it with the red dot in the middle. That's the Collect Pond. So during the war, it wasn't just the British fighting the Americans. About a quarter of their forces were these hired guns from Germany, hired mercenaries called Hessians. This was their very cool outfits. And the story is that one night, a Hessian soldier was drunk and was dared into swimming across the Collect Pond, at which point a serpentine, shadowy Collect Pond monster swallowed him and dragged him down to the murky bottoms of the pond. And that was sort of sent this fear of God through these visiting mercenaries. I think it probably was more likely a bit of PR or psyops or whatever by the outgunned Americans, just trying to get a little bit of fear into the very much dominating British and Hessian forces. What was also happening to the Collect Pond at this time, of course, was a lot of pollution. And, this is the late 1700s. In the early 1800s, a canal was dug to dredge it. I believe that was what we call Canal Street. And shortly after that, the canal and the lake or the pond were covered over. I mentioned that because they were not drained. And so had they been drained, maybe we could have found monster bones and Hessian bones. But alas, it had been filled with landfill. Interestingly enough, some of the foundations in that neighborhood, initially that were built in the mid 1800s would sink because this was basically, not meant for a lot of that New York City bedrock. That didn't really exist here. So it was a dangerous place for disease and pollution. If not for monsters, it was already had a bad reputation for itself. And if you're ever down there, you can kind of tell that you're in a bowl. I mean, you really are. You see it. Manhattan is sort of a grade place, or flat place at grade. But if you ever walk through the Five Points and through some of the parks there by City Hall, you really kind of get the sense of how the topography changes and how a pond could be there. Our next sort of monster of New York City is one of my favorite stories from the book. Again, this is an illustration by Kath Nash. It's incredible. This is Ming, the tiger of the Harlem Projects, who was discovered in 2003, living in the Drew Hamilton houses in Harlem, and had been there for 3 years. Antoine Yates was the owner of this tiger. Self-educated animal expert, veterinarian enthusiast, and also had like an alligator in the apartment. Speaking of alligators in the series, he had alligator in the projects, and found an injured cat. He had a really good relationship by all measures with this tiger. Stayed home all day with it, meditated with it, tried to give it mental exercise to keep it sharp. Nonetheless, it's not a good idea to keep a tiger in an apartment. I'm not saying that. It's a spectacularly bad idea. Those are the words I used to describe it in the book. But, as kindly as you could treat a tiger in an apartment, Antoine Yates seemed to do. The problem is one day, 3 years into having the tiger, he found an injured cat. Being the self-educated veterinarian enthusiast that he was, he decided that he alone could help the cat, brought it into his apartment, and the tiger, being a tiger, decided it wanted to kill the cat. Antoine got in the middle of that, and the tiger bit Antoine. And remarkably, that's not that crazy. Like that, I mean, it's crazy that it had in the first place, but like, of course, a tiger would do that. It's crazy that it didn't happen earlier. But what's equally remarkable is that he had such a bond with the tiger that he basically was able to command the tiger to relent, and got away, walked away, took himself to the hospital and said, "Hey, I got bit by a pit bull." He had like a huge circumference bite wound on his leg. They're like, "Sure." The hospital staff calls the police and says, "I think there's probably a tiger in this apartment." And as you can see, this is a real photograph of what happened that day. Kath had a lot of artistic liberty with the illustrations in the book. For the tiger chapter, I was like, look, there is no better, just color by numbers. I mean, like, because there's nothing better than the actual photograph they got. This is Officer Martin Duffy rappelling down the 5th floor apartment, seeing the tiger roar at him, and he's about to shoot a tranquilizer at the tiger. And Ming would be taken out right through the public elevator, right down through the lobby, and would be moved to a big cat facility. I don't know if it was like Tiger King place. It was in Ohio, Berlin, Ohio, and Ming only died like a year or two ago. The one thing I will say about this, I'm not giving Antoine Yates a pass. I spoke to him on the phone for the book. He's a nice guy, misguided, albeit, but I'm not giving him a pass. But he was able to get that tiger to relent and sort of, remember their bond in the heat of him being a tiger. And on the same exact day, this is crazy. What were their names? Siegfried and Roy were attacked by tigers and could not get, like the supposed tiger experts, could not get their tigers to relent. Now, I don't think the lesson here is that be more like Antoine. I think the lesson is like there are no tiger experts. These are wild animals that can kill you. But I was so excited to include this chapter in the book just because I think there are a lot of, probably exotic pets in New York City, and just like a lot of things we don't know about. And that was so appealing to me, was not the downfall of Ming and Antoine, but just sort of how they had made it work for so long. And I don't know, I bet that's happening all the time. And, Wild City is like a book that covers a lot of the natural history, but like, it's also just like about how animals, for better or worse, are sort of interacting in New York. And this is definitely, one of the examples of that. Another sort of recent predator animal that I wanted to include in this presentation is the coyotes. So this is, as someone at Gotham Coyote described it to me, it's probably the biggest apex predator that New York City can have room for, Coyotes are an interesting thing. They're doing really well in New York City. They're doing, I think, better than people realize. And that's to say, I think there are more coyotes than people maybe realize. There are more coyotes than even I realize. And I look pretty closely at this. So the long story with coyotes is that, involves wolves and bears and, of course, mountain lions, which those 3 animals were predominant in this part of the country for forever until, the Europeans came and we started, hunting them out, finding that we really couldn't coexist with our cities with these huge predators. And the other thing that happened is that, farmland has sort of like replicated the plains and sort of like the high country that coyotes thrive in, just to say that the landscape has changed, making it easier for them to traverse west to east, which is what they've done. And the predators that would have competed with them, killed them, and made it impossible for them to thrive in a place like New York City 500 years ago are not here. So coyotes have really taken advantage of that. And not surprisingly, they've come into New York City through the Bronx, because that is the only part of New York City that is connected to the mainland United States. And they have since made their way to Staten Island, made their way to Queens and Brooklyn, and even to Manhattan. Coyotes have been spotted since around 2010, I think, maybe even earlier than that. And now they think there's probably like 40 or 50 that are full-time residents in New York City. when I wrote the draft of Wild City, I gave it to the editors, and they're like, "You'll get one more chance to like make changes to it." One of the changes I was so excited to make was that a coyote had been spotted in Central Park in 2019, and I thought that was like such a huge deal. And like we look at this illustration, and you know, it's a coyote crossing Midtown, and while that's not really from a photograph, like a coyote must have traveled across somewhere in Midtown to get to, or to Manhattan anyway, to get into Central Park. Well, I've come to learn since is that there are, I think, dens in Central Park. So they're not just there. I mean, they are like living there. This was a coyote that was found on the roof of the LIC bar in Long Island City. Lots of questions about how it got up on the roof. But again, the better question is, how did it get to Queens? It's easy to see how it got to the Bronx. It just walked in from Westchester County. But how does a coyote get to Queens? How does a coyote get to Manhattan? How does a coyote get to Staten Island? And that's one of these places, you know, these are one of these animals where the archipelago, the landscape of New York City really comes into play. And you're like, wow, yeah, this is like, how does wildlife sort of move around the city? They think Gotham Coyote and other New York City wildlife experts at the Parks Department think that it's probably abandoned train tracks. Not abandoned, but like when, you know, a train's not going, the other 55 minutes of the hour that a train's not barreling through, it's a good time for a coyote to make its run. So they're sort of thriving in New York City. This is a picture of the one in Central Park. How terrifying, but also how cool. And, you know, having a predator in the environment is good for the ecosystem. You know, they spread the nutrient cycle, they spread the urban forest, they spread, they weed out the sick animals. These guys are omnivores. That's another thing I really like about them. They'll eat shellfish, they'll eat rats, they'll eat, you know, mice, they'll eat what they can. And, you know, they are fulfilling this ecological need that we have moved out when we got rid of the mountain lions and bears. It would be really helpful if they could take down a deer, because I know Staten Island in particular has a real deer problem. But so far, you know, what's been really remarkable about the coyotes is that there has been very little, if any, negative interactions with people. And the most important thing to do, you know, as my PSA moment, is to just like really never mess with a coyote. Like, you don't ever need to. It's not good for you, and it's really not good for the coyote. So you just really want to make that distinction, and make that a certainty that you don't really mess with wildlife. And I think that's just a good rule of thumb in general. But the way it's been told to me is that there are probably like coyotes living a lot closer to us in New York City than we even realize. It's very cool. I think a very good addition to New York City wildlife. And this is just sort of a map that I made showing the distribution of the alligators, of the coyotes. Those are howling coyotes and not llamas. They kind of look like llamas from here. But I don't actually have one in Brooklyn, because I don't know where one is in Brooklyn, though I'm just sure there is one. And I will just add this because I think, you know, I'm out in Eastern Long Island right now, and I think they're probably on their way to the Hamptons and Montauk. I just think that's like, they've made it as far as Queens, and like, what's to stop? If they can make it in Queens, like, why can't they make it out in Manhasset and, you know, other places? So just something to consider. It's just like a ever-changing ecosystem, and it's all, I think, ultimately very exciting stuff. So as we were just talking about the alligators in the sewer, I just want to make another PSA that, like, alligators in the sewer are obviously like a very scary prospect, but in a way, the sewer itself is a pretty dangerous entity of New York City when we look at things like combined sewer overflow. So New York City's sewer system, like most built around its time, combine clean stormwater, otherwise clean stormwater, with sewage water. And anytime it rains more than half an inch, I believe, combined stormwater and human waste go into these outlets and into our harbor and our river. And it's super obviously unhealthy to swim in. It's bad for shellfish. It's bad for marine life. It's just like not a great thing. This is an old map of New York City before Europeans came here. What we're looking at is that red line is the line between Upper Manhattan and sort of the Spuyten Duyvil area of the Bronx. That blue squiggly line was the once Tibbetts Brook. Tibbetts Brook is one of these combined sewer overflows now, where like 5 million gallons of Tibbetts Brook combines with the sewer every day. I believe this picture is actually of that sewer, where it is sent to Ward's Island, where it is needlessly treated. So there are some efforts underway to daylight Tibbetts Brook, and basically make the sewers a little bit less dangerous by rerouting that otherwise clean water to the Harlem River, and letting itself, recycle and replenish naturally, rather than, taking it out of that CSO combination. Daylighting the Tibbetts Brook won't solve that on its own, but when it comes to water mixing with human waste, I do believe that every drop counts, and it is like 5 million gallons a day. And there are other things that the city can do, like rain gardens, rooftop gardens, more permeable asphalt, just more trees. I mean, like there are things we can do to mitigate CSO, but the real danger isn't alligators. The real danger is pollution going into our water, and I don't want to really stay on this picture too much, but this is what it is. This is sewer overflow, that's an outlet. And this is unfortunately happening all over the city. And it does need to happen to an extent, but we can mitigate it a lot. And I just think being aware of it is one way to start. One final bit about the alligators in the sewer. So like what's happening now, right? So this is, of course, I don't need to tell you, Steve Irwin, the late, great Steve Irwin on the right. On the left is Jim Nesci. I believe I'm saying that right. Nesci. He is like the Steve Irwin of the Chicago suburban area. He is someone I reached out to for the book, for the article way back when for Untapped. And his point of view is that alligators in the sewer can get down there in the sewer. They can maybe live out their lifetime in the sewer, but they're not going to like reproduce. They're not going to make a nest. They're not going to find a mate, and they're not going to be able to really hunt all of that successfully. But I think they do still end up getting down there. So that's sort of the long story short. Like, do alligators in the sewer exist? Yes, but are they thriving as a population? Probably not. The one caveat to that being, like, this is an animal that has existed this way since the time of the dinosaurs. So, they've like lived through ice ages. So it's a little bit of a hubris to say, surely they couldn't live in our sewer systems. Like, they're pretty good at adapting. So I think that, I'm not gonna count them out just yet. And nor should I. This is a 2010 alligator that was found in the Queens sewer by a different Officer Duffy from the NYPD. I forget, I think his name was James Duffy. At any rate, they weren't sure where it ended up, but they weren't sure how it got in there, but they certainly found this alligator in the sewer. This is another one from 2015. 2015 was around 205th Street in Manhattan. So it does really happen from time to time. And this is to sort of commemorate this funny but yet true moment in New York City history. This is Michael Moscone. I again hope I'm pronouncing any of these names correctly tonight. Michael, until recently, was the Manhattan Borough historian. Was gracious to sit down with me for bacon, egg, and cheese bagels one morning and let me pick his brain about everything New York City history-wise. And he's also the founder of Alligators in the Sewer Day, which is a New York City holiday on February 10th. As he says, it's a crummy time of year, and everybody loves a holiday. So he's really keeping the legend going, and was so grateful to be able to speak to him and just to learn all about this. And so, if anybody asks, if there are alligators in the sewer, just say maybe. I'm not really sure. So that's our talk. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been here. We'll stick around for some questions. Obviously, the book is called Wild City. You can follow on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, Wild City NYC. And yeah, this has been so much fun. I've been so happy to do this talk and talk about one of my favorite topics.
Oh, you've kept me busy tonight. I've had a lot of stuff in the chat.
Just gonna look through here. Hey man, there you are.
Doing. Sorry, my
no worries.
something's a little slow. This awesome. As you can see by the emojis flying through the screen, people definitely loved
thanks everybody.
the talk. It's so funny that you mentioned Michael. I was going to put the link in, but I haven't had a chance yet. He's doing a presentation for us.
Oh, that's awesome. He's
Andrew
the best.
Green on August 4th, because he's a huge Andrew Haswell Green fan, because he's
Sure.
like, nobody knows about
Yeah.
this guy.
Yeah. One other thing about Michael that he told me, and I think this is like an interesting New York City fact. Why is Staten Island part of New York City and not obviously New Jersey? Why is it's a decree from the King of England when this was like a colony. It was that every island in the harbor belongs to New York, to the New York colony. So that's why these like land masses that are so obviously New Jersey, it's like goes back to the King of England, and it just like has never changed. So
including the island that we both share in common, Martha's Vineyard, which was also
right, Dutchess County. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
why it's called Dukes County.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we do awesome. By the way, we do have some questions for you. So let's start with Jeffrey Bernard had 2 questions from the beginning. Any other reptiles, snakes? I guess that was in general floating around in the sewer system or underground.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are eels have been found down there. There's a lot of cockroaches. The sewer photograph is by God, what's his name? Like the NYC sewer guy. He's quoted twice in my book, in like very beginning and the very end.
Steve Duncan.
Yeah. That's his photograph, and he's like, I think he's like, because he's like a sewer spelunker. Like he goes in there. He's insane. I love him. But he would tell you that there are like eels and cockroaches and snails down there primarily. But there are a lot more reptiles. If I could write Wild City today, I would probably do like a chapter on like a Staten Island salamander, and like there are like a lot of cool smaller amphibians and reptiles floating around New York City than I think most people realize.
Yeah. I mean, the point that you've made throughout the series, which I think is a valid one and important, is that New York is a much more diverse ecosystem for wildlife than people think it is.
Yeah. And I think, the animals we covered tonight, like they're like kind of like the collect pond monster East River, but the coyote is like a real example of that. It's like the coyote can make a living in New York. Like it's like really working out, and that's testament to like the amount of open space we have, the amount of like species and like just like cover that we have, that a coyote can do well,
Yeah, totally. And I mentioned, I put it in the chat. I think Janet Bracco was on, but she may have had to sign off. I swore I used to live right across the street from Greenwood Cemetery.
Right.
And I remember there was howling one night, and I don't know if it was a fox or a coyote, but I think there was.
That sounds like a coyote to me. Yeah.
In like 2007 or 8. But I remember then reading something. I can't remember if anybody has any information on it. I think it might have been a coyote, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Jeffrey Bernard also asked, if you come across one, would it be to correct? No, try that again. If you come across one, would it be correct to assume that there's more than one? And I'm assuming he means alligators as well.
I would assume if I saw an alligator in the sewer, I don't know what I'd be doing down there, but like, because I think it's hard for them to find, I think they're just one-offs, right? Like, I'm of the opinion, and again, I'm not going to count out an alligator on anything, given how long they've survived and adapted, but I would be under the impression that it's a one-off, because I don't think they can really find mates. I don't think they can make nests, and I don't think they can, like, I just think it's like not ideal for them to propagate.
Right.
So I would assume the alligator was by itself. However, Teddy May's account from 1959 in Robert Daly's book is that there were like, hella. I mean, he didn't say hella, but there were like several, so I would say that with coyotes, I mean, I think they're like, they're like pup little, I forget what the collective noun is, like kid or something like that. But like, I think that like with coyotes, if you see one, you're probably seeing a few.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think you are correct about that. Are you aware of, this is from Pete Tannen, by the way, are you aware of any other cities that are also reputed to have sewer alligators?
Pack of coyotes, by the way, that's a click now. So that guy, Jim Nesci, he said he found one in Chicago, but I feel like it was in the suburbs. It feels like a uniquely New York City thing. And again, that's like, it's like hard to kind of quantify. I mean, I haven't really looked into it, but I haven't heard of anything. I would just guess that Miami and like those places where alligators are like thriving where human development isn't. like there were, alligator was probably in Miami 500 years ago. So like, why wouldn't it find its way back to that sewer system like that? I would imagine like those places where, but like this doesn't really seem like a alligator habitat up here yet. They exist up here. So I don't really know. I mean, if it's a human induced problem, it's sort of like cockroaches and rats and pigeons, like wherever then we are, there's a chance for this,
Right.
But New York's the only one I've ever heard of.
Pete also asked, and you answered this, but if you want to clarify, you can. How did the coyotes get from the Bronx to the other boroughs? I was going to make an off-color joke about taking the tour of the five, but
yeah, they took the DQE. Yeah. I think the ones in Staten Island would have come from New Jersey, because Staten Island is basically the New Jersey landmass, and that body of water, the Arthur Kill, is like so narrow as composed to the East River, the Hudson River, or even the Harlem River, that I think that would be an easier swim. I don't think it's like also like a very busy shipping channel, so like I don't think that happened, but like that could be a swimmable distance, and I think that like otherwise, like I do believe it's like probably the Triborough Bridge. Like I think it's probably the rail tracks specifically, just because there are those breaks
right
in traffic, whereas on the BQE there are no breaks in traffic, and I don't think a coyote could really take the Henry Hudson Parkway, but
yeah, probably. And Hellgate too. I mean, Hellgate's probably
yeah.
That would be interesting to sort of track one.
The funny thing about the coyote too, I'll just say, is Gotham Coyote, like the way they described it to me is so funny. Like they have these trap cameras, and wherever they put a trap camera, they would find a coyote. Like everywhere they hypothesized in the Bronx at first, they're like, yeah, they're like, if we think there's a coyote there, there is a coyote there. What they would run into is they would move further away from the they're like, when they had hypothesis, like I wonder if it's in this like more densely populated area, the camera would get stolen, which is like a very New York City thing, like so when citizen science runs up against just like New Yorkers being assholes, like, well, yeah, you can leave your camera out, dude, it's New York, what are you doing? I don't care if it's for coyotes.
That's its own other website.
Yeah like selling hot motion cameras on the back of a truck somewhere and just making a living.
I love it. Any other? Oh wait, we did have another question that came into the chat. Interesting question from Eileen Sweeney. She said, could there be a group of coyote dog hybrids in New York as well?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some thinking that that's what it might be. Yeah. I mean, or like coy wolves, or like, yeah, I mean, I didn't get too into the, like the genetics of it. And to be honest, I think I found out about that possibility, like after I had sort of written the chapter, and I was really talking more about like, in the book, like, how the neighbors feel, or like, or like, and like the broad strokes, like how the hell did, like, one of the questions I really focus on is like, how did they get to that bar in Queens? Like, forget how they got on the roof. Like, how did you get to Long Island City? Like, how did you get to that block? Is really the bigger question. But I think, that what we classically think about the coyote is like adaptable, opportunistic. And so if like crossbreeding is going to help their species, then like the coyote of all species seems like something that would take advantage of that. So yeah,
scrappy. And actually, Bernard asked, can coyotes be tagged so we can follow their travels?
I think they can, but I think there are also, like, I think Gotham Coyote did have cameras up. I don't know if they still do. I don't know if they're still doing work, but I know that the Parks Department, the wildlife unit, I was showing you my cool flip notebook earlier. The wildlife unit, run by Richard Simon out of the Parks Department. Richard Simon is quoted in the Coyote chapter and all over Wild City. They have like the most up-to-date information, I think. And I think there's an element of like not really reporting as many coyotes as there really are. I mean, that's my gut. I don't really have that on any, but that's just like my feeling, is that like New York City isn't being like, yo, there's a coyote in that park, because like it's the same reason with the trap cameras, like, because like the principle that people are assholes, and like I get it. Like, I know what to do, but I get that people don't know what to do. And like, I get those kids in Harlem in 1935 are like, let's kill this alligator with a shovel, because it's like, this alligator doesn't belong here, or that was their thinking. And like, you know, so like, I would imagine they don't really want to, like, you know, because a coyote typically is not going to disturb a person. So we really want to keep, like, they know to keep away from us, but I don't know if we know to keep away from them, you know.
Right.
But we should. For the 100th time, we really should. Yeah. I think one was put down at LaGuardia because it got too close. It like knew someone had fed it. That's the problem. Someone had fed it, and then it approached a human, because it's like, yeah, that's a food source now. Like, either I'm going to attack that or they're going to give me something. But like, that person, and then that coyote, unfortunately, like, is ruined for urban living at that point. And like, the humane and cost-effective thing to do is just put that coyote down. So that's the only one that I know of. I don't remember when that was, in the last 5 years, by LaGuardia.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't hear. Nancy said coyotes know how to cross streets like a true New Yorker.
Yeah.
So true.
Well,
so
like
true.
That illustration of the coyote crossing the cab, when Kath presented that, I was like, oh, haha, funny. But like, yo, I mean, like, to get to Central Park, like, how you got to cross a cab, probably, like, like that, probably something close to that probably happens. So like, I mean, it's, you know, I don't know, it's
very true. Well, Tom, this has been a lot of fun. I know people are saying in the chat as well. And
thank you all so much.
Series has been, so much fun. So hopefully we will hear from you again. Also, just going to say, Tom, congratulations again on your newborn son.
Thank you so much.
Last month. And as I had said, given the awesome name of Arthur, I love that.
Arthur J. Hynes, first of his name. He's great. The best thing I ever did for myself, was have Arthur and marry his mom. But the most recent good thing I did was make these slides before he was born, because I really haven't slept at all. So this was all done like 6 weeks ago before he was. It's the best gift I've given myself, was to do all of this on Memorial Day. So thank you all for bearing with me, and for getting through my sleep deprived presentation here.
Totally. This was, again, amazing fun, and good to see you, and hopefully we'll continue in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let you know when we're nearby each other later next month.
Yeah. Let me know.
All right.
Get together. I know my dad would love to be on this talk tonight. Welcome into the Insider fold.
Very cool.
And so for those of you still with us, tomorrow we also have a really great presentation. We are doing the cast iron architecture of New York City with the director of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, Andrew Berman. I previewed that. It's real. The photos are outstanding. So if you are an insider, it is free. If not, it is $10. It's bookable through Untapped New York. If you'd like to join us tomorrow night, it's at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight, I guess is what we're in. We're in EDT right now. And then on Thursday at 5 p.m., we are also doing the Department of Environmental Protection has a nature walk over at their digester eggs at Newton Creek. And the artist, George Takis, who did that nature walk, is featured in a video they made just for us. I know I've said this before. I'm really happy about this. Open House New York tried to get them to do it, and they said, nope, we're giving it to Untapped New York. And it's super awesome. I also previewed that today. George Takis is great, and the video tour of the walk is amazing. That's at Thursday at 5 p.m. So please join us then. We've got a lot of programming this week continuing. And then next week, I am with you on Wednesday for the next chapter of the Lost New York series, the Lost Amusement Parks, because it's July, time to be at an amusement park. So hope to see you there next Wednesday at noon. Everyone, have a good night. Again, Tom, thank you again. Hopefully I will see you in person in August and with an oyster. Maybe we'll do oysters for sure.
That's appropriate. Yeah, that would be appropriate.
There it is. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.